paperwork that this was more than probably a homicide. And so I did a preliminary investigation. Then I had a relative with a degree in criminal science. He did a exploratory investigation. He concluded that it was a homicide, that LaVena had been beaten, had a broken neck. He figured out all these injuries, and then we put together a homicide team to confirm everything that we found, and we had some viable information that LaVena didn't have a loaded magazine. In fact, at the crime scene, you got LaVena lying there at night. So we talked to her on the morning of the 17th, so she got murdered that night. Her body laid there overnight because we could see the transition from day to night. So we don't know if LaVena was beaten to death. We don't know if she was shot to death, or we don't know if she bled out. All we know is that she was raped and murdered. And people ask me, well, how did you know she was raped? Because the criminal investigators said she was raped. So we have an affidavit that said LaVena was raped. So this was a rape. They beat the hell out of her. And then I think they thought they had beaten her to death. And then she moved because they tried to burn her body up. And she must have woke up and used her hand to try to douse the fire. And so they grabbed her to her knees and shot her. She fell dead on her left side. You got, lividity running down the left side of her body. But when they found her body, she was lying on her back with her right hand thrust over her face. So they tried to conceal the crime, or they staged the crime scene. And I've got a bunch of pictures where there's no rifle in the pictures. But you said this was a suicide. So you got witness statements that you made up, and everybody was saying the weapon was laying on her body, the muzzle was up, the muzzle was down. The Army made up all kinds of stuff, but they had pictures with no weapon in the pictures. The only time, now you got to hear this, a weapon showed up was when the medevac person got there. You got LaVena's body lying there. You got his gurney or stretcher lying next to her, and the rifle finally shows up on the other side of the gurney, and the medevac person say, well, I was the one who moved the weapon. So that was a lie. So the lies just kept piling up and piling up. My team investigated this. We did a thorough job. Apparently, we did a better job than the Army did. So right now, the Army, and I'm talking more specifically, Chris, he solicited the support of two people. He solicited the support of Michael Graham, and he said at that time it was a suicide. Then he I sent the case to a Cold Case Institute. The person who was in charge of the Cold Case Institute, her name was Cheryl McCullum. She allowed the students to select our case versus Jack the Ripper. But when the kids came up with it was a homicide, Cheryl McCullum was calling me, giving me pointers about what the students were finding. Then all of a sudden, she switched gears. She started talking about how great Chris Gray was, and she said there was not enough evidence to substantiate a homicide. So that's the verbiage that Chris Gray, Cheryl McCollum, Kevin, the general Kevin Burns, who was involved in it some kind of way. So it's got worse in a way because obviously they're not going to come clean. So we're just going to have to keep putting the information. I didn't want to put all this information out there, the pictures and everything else, but we had to do that to make our case. So now you got a bunch of people just being down and right ornery and not coming clean, knowing good and well that we know that LaVena was beat up, raped, and murdered. Their whole thing is, well, we're the great army, and we don't have to come clean if we don't want to, so you get over it. But that ain't happening. We're suffering from this, you know. My poor wife, I had to put her under a doctor's care. She was so traumatized. My poor baby is in and out of the hospital, and thank God I'm strong enough to hold my family together. But it's hard when everybody is carrying their own guilt. You know, I should have said something. I should have did this. Me,
Yeah.
I agreed with my daughter that she had a right to go into the military if she wanted to, but nobody had a right to play God and take her life. But that's what happened.
Dr. Johnson, your family has been through a lot. Your family has been through hell. And 5 years ago when I interviewed you, I heard your story for the first time. And every time I hear the story, every time I see the pictures of your beautiful family and your daughter, it brings tears to my eyes, man. It's, you know, I hope that you guys find the justice and.
Yeah, can I just say this? It's
Go
really
ahead,
hard to know that this is people in the U.S. Army. They're supposed to be protecting our country against those aggressors who try to destroy our system, and you destroying it from the inside by raping and murdering our daughters and then lying on them, traumatizing the family, and then telling them we really don't care. And that's hard to fathom, and I'm not saying I'm special, but I'm a veteran. I was in the Army for 3 years, and I worked for the Department of Army for over 28. I retired from them. And this is what I got for all those years of loyalty.
Man, we're going to take a quick break, brother. We're going to go to the phone lines in just a moment, give you some time to regroup, and we'll be back, brother. Hold on one second. Those that are just now tuning in, we want to thank you for listening to our show. Just to bring you up to speed, you're listening to Dr. John Johnson, who is the father of the late, great LaVena Johnson, LaVena Lynn Johnson, who was raped and murdered in the military. She was 19 years old when this atrocity happened to her. We'll be right back, guys. And we're going to go to the phone lines for questions.
Well, welcome to the King Yah podcast. As you may have guessed, I am your host, King Yah, a father, activist, and professional speaker. On this podcast, we discuss relationships, criminal justice, news and politics, Black history, culture, and domestic violence awareness. If this is your first time being here, I want to say thank you and encourage you to keep listening. Each week you can expect to hear thought-provoking interviews as well as personal relationship tips that would help enhance your life. You will have access to resourceful downloads that you can implement daily to become more productive. Thank you for spending some time with me today. Follow me on Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter, KingYah2020. My podcasts are also available on iHeartRadio, Spotify, iTunes, SoundCloud, Anchor, TuneIn, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Just look for King Yah. The purpose of this podcast is because everyday people inspire me through their stories of trial and error in life. Now let's jump into your favorite podcast. What better way to share our stories?
All right, so for our listeners that are just now tuning in, again, we want to thank you We've got listeners all over the world listening today to today's show. We appreciate you, your support, and we appreciate the strength, tenacity, and the resilience of our brother, Dr. John Johnson, who is sharing the story of his daughter, LaVena Lynn Johnson, who was, her story, The Silent Truth, Unsolved Mysteries of LaVena Johnson. You've got a lot of support, and Naima Latif is on the line. Naima, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hey, Naima, how are you?
I'm fantastic. Quite a moving story. This situation, it really is challenging just listening because the outrage that it invokes is overwhelming.
Time I hear the story, it hurts because I've got a daughter, and I imagine,
Yes.
what if this was my daughter? This could have been my daughter. This could have been my son.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
when you have your own daughter, it really does make your blood boil.
Yeah. Dr. Johnson, this is Naima Latif. She is the host of the Female Solution. Dr. John Johnson, meet Naima Latif.
Absolutely. And Dr. Johnson, first I extend my heartfelt sympathies because I know this is an extreme trauma for your family. And then, as you said, to be a loyal veteran and have this happen is just unconscionable. But I believe all things happen for the purpose of teaching us lessons we need to learn. And what we are learning in a very painful way is that the military is not a place where we are going to experience the loyalty of this nation. My father used to give me some horrendous stories from when he was in World War II and how the black soldiers were treated worse than the white German prisoners. So the underlying meanness is always there. And, the thing that we fight for abroad we don't have here in America. And certainly the kind of hatred and the cruelty that exists in the hearts of people, many of whom are in the military, gets manifest in the kind of crime that was committed against your daughter. So I certainly send you all of my prayers for the healing of the souls of your family, because I know it's a very difficult thing to live through. It is a means for us to gain greater understanding, and your daughter's life is a powerful life, and that it's going to have a transformative impact on this society. I do want to ask you, because I know that the military won't talk about these kinds of things. They cover them up. Are you aware of all of the individuals involved in this? How much information have you been able to discover in terms of any officers that are responsible for the cover-up of this crime?
Yeah, here's what we think happened. There's a 4-star general. His name's Kevin Burns. I can't swear he did it, but he was the TRADOC commander. So he was in charge of that military in Iraq. We think LaVena was beaten and raped. She went to a medical person. Her name was Captain Vicky Irish, to get examined. Vicky Irish asked, "What happened to you?" And LaVena told her she was beaten and raped and who did it. Apparently, this Irish went and told the culprit. LaVena Johnson said, "You beat and raped her." We got a witness, and I don't want to expose her name right now because she's actually working with us. She said her and 2 black males stood and watched 2 white males in plain clothes escort LaVena to a car and shoved her in, and nobody saw her after that. There was a